Sort of now looking back on it, it's easier to, it's easier to see everything that sort of came up and what went wrong and everything like that. We had initially met on Tinder, and he just seemed so lovely. He was saying all the right things, everything I needed to hear, he was saying. He just sounded perfect. We met after talking for maybe a month or two because I was trying not to meet up with somebody so quickly. But once we did meet up, that was it. We were together constantly. We moved away together within 6 months. Now looking back on that, I can see that I was moved away to isolate me. That happened really, really quickly, and I didn't see at the time that that's what was happening. We lived in Liverpool for about a year. I obviously didn't have anybody while I was over there. It was just me and him. He couldn't cope with how life was in Liverpool, so we ended up moving back to Belfast. And it was lockdown at that point, so we were in the house together constantly, pretty much. And that's where things got really bad. I think just being around each other all the time escalated it. Not being able to get out of the house definitely escalated things as well. He had always been quite a snappy and huffy kind of person, but it got very violent physically in lockdown. Sort of that last year was when everything just got really bad. The incident he was arrested for, that was probably the worst. That was the worst of it. It had started the night before. He had been in a really bad mood for days. He'd been completely ignoring me, which was something he did, ignored my existence completely. I was just trying to manage him pretty much. So I'd gone out and gotten his favourite food to just try and bring him around a wee bit. And I brought it into his bedroom to give it to him. And he just started arguing with me straight away. And I was just so drained that I didn't have it in me anymore. I left the food down and I went into another room. But he followed me straight into the other room with a crossbow. Looked through the scope, pointed it at me and said, "This is for you." And then said nothing else and just walked away. And at that point I was like, I have to go. I'm going to die here if I don't leave. But I was too scared. He had a crossbow, like he was happy to point it at me. I had a dog in the house that I didn't want to leave behind. It didn't feel safe to leave at that minute. So I was hoping that overnight he would maybe fall asleep and I could maybe sneak out of the house or something, So I really quietly started trying to pack things. He didn't go to sleep. It got to the next morning and I had been awake all night. I was just so anxious and scared. I'd kept the dog in the room with me. And his mum had rang that morning because he had turned his phone off. So I had answered the phone and was trying to be really quiet because I didn't want him to hear me, especially not talking to his mum. And she sort of just said, "Is he in one of his moods?" And I said yes and said nothing else. And she just said, "You have to leave." She didn't know that he was violent or anything like that towards me. She just knew what he was like as a person. It wasn't safe for me to just leave because I wouldn't have been able to get the dog out or anything like that with him having the crossbow and his bedroom being right above the front door. So I tried to frame it in a way that made it sound like I was leaving to benefit him. So I'd gone in and I said, "Look, I don't think you're happy with me being here. I think I'm really stressing you out, whatever. I'm going to leave and hopefully give you a bit of space." And at the time he just said, "Yeah, that's fine." But literally within minutes, he was, straight round behind me into the other room and he just beat me on and off over a couple of hours. It was punches, kicks. At one point, he had me by the throat against a wall and picked me up. So my feet were off the ground and he was just holding me up by my throat. Another time, he'd actually headbutted me and I fell to the ground and he kicked me so hard I could hear my ribs break. And, I was obviously crying and everything like that, but he didn't care. After sort of my ribs broke or whatever, I went into the room and closed the door behind me and sat down straight away. As I sat down, he fired the crossbow through the door. If I hadn't have sat down, that would have went through me because it cleared the door and went into the concrete wall behind me and stuck in the wall because it came through with such force. He just came into the room and pulled the dart out of the wall and walked away again. So I was like, I'm going to have to go, this is it. So I went out to try and go down the stairs to get away, but he came straight out behind me, put his arm around my throat, and like a rear naked choke, pulled me down to the ground. He was holding me off the ground by my neck. I couldn't actually get a grip or anything like that, and I started screaming. I was just screaming, hoping that a neighbour would hear me or something, but the screaming just made him angrier. And his face was right at my ear while he was choking me, and he just kept saying, "Stop screaming, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you." And while he was saying that, I was starting to pass out. So I was seeing spots and I really thought this is it. Like, I'm dying. Like, I'm actually dying here, which is like nobody, you don't think you're ever going to experience that. Like, this is it. I'm not going to be here anymore. And I passed out. But he must have panicked because I passed out and he loosened his grip a bit and I came around and I just threw myself head first down the stairs. I didn't even take the time to try and stand up. The front door was locked and he always locked it and took the key out. So I didn't even know where the key was. I wasn't going to attempt that, but the back door was cracked. Now his back door his back garden is locked in, but it was out of the house. So I just went out and I screamed and I screamed and I screamed. In the midst of everything, I had phoned my stepdad to ask him to come down. I didn't tell him what was going on or anything. I just asked if he could come and get me. Thankfully, he rang the police. But as I was screaming, my ex-partner left the house and got into his car because he knew he wasn't coming back into the house. But because my stepdad had phoned the police, he was arrested within minutes. Literally, he was picked up in his car on the Antrim Road about 5 minutes after he'd left the house. And then the police came, they spoke to me, and then I went to the hospital. And that was, he's been in jail since then. It was hard getting away. There's no point in saying it's not going to be, but my life has changed completely. I have confidence again. I feel like I have a life to look forward to, and I never, ever, ever had that when I was with him. It was just crisis management the entire time. It's looking for the small things like the love bombing at the start. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If something doesn't sit right with you or it feels uncomfortable, speak to somebody about it. It doesn't matter if it might sound silly because I didn't know what was happening to me was abuse at all. I just thought that was very, very normal and it clearly wasn't. And it got to such a dangerous point for me that I really might not be here today if things had been slightly different. And I don't want any other woman or girl to feel that way or to go through it and for it to get to the point where I got to.